All right, as it is a few minutes past our starting time, we would like to welcome everyone to this IPR webinar hosted by IPR and Makovsky. My name is Olivia Kresick, and I am the Project and Outreach Manager for the Institute for Public Relations, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to fostering greater use of research and research-based knowledge in public relations and corporate communication practice. Before we begin, please note that we will have time for a Q&A with our speakers at the end of the webinar. At the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A box. If at any time you click on the box and type in your questions, please indicate if you're asking a specific speaker or all three. We will collect the questions and moderate the Q&A at the end of the webinar. Please only ask your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat, as questions may get lost in the chat. Today, our webinar features 3 of our 4 top finalists from the 2020 Makovsky Master's Thesis of the Year Award. Since 2017, Makovsky, an integrated communications firm headquartered in New York City, has sponsored this award. IPR started this award in 1981 to annually celebrate a master's thesis that most contributes to advancing research-based knowledge in the field of public relations. Here with me today is IPR trustee and founder of Makovsky, Ken Makovsky. Hi, Ken. Thanks for joining us today and for supporting this award.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Great, great. Well, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time because we know everyone is busy. I would like to welcome our 3 panelists today. Luis Arrieta from the University of Oklahoma, Gloris Trujillo from the University of Alabama, and Manuelita Maldonado from the University of Southern California. Unable to join us today is Pauline Berry from McMaster University, who was one of our 4 finalists. I have to tell you, this was one of the most amazing years ever. The theses that were entered were just absolutely outstanding. In fact, I would even use the word awesome. And they were so amazing that it made it very hard for the judges to select a winner. But as in these things every year, we have to select a winner. And as hard as it was, we selected one. And the winner is Manuelita Maldonado from the University of Southern California, whose thesis is titled "The Rise of Intelligent Machines, How Artificial Intelligence is Transforming the Public Relations Industry." Now, Manuelita will receive a $2,000 prize, and her advisor, Fred Cook, will receive a $1,000 prize. And we will hear from Manuelita pretty shortly. But I want to thank all of you again, Gloris, Manuelita, for being here today. First up to hear from is Luis. Luis graduated from the University of Oklahoma, and his thesis is titled "Connecting a Global Capability Framework for PR and Communications Management to Organizational and Cultural Socialization." Luis, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ken, for the introduction. Thank you, Makovsky and the IPR for this opportunity. Just one second. Okay, well, as Ken said, my name is Luis Fernando Vergara. I am a PhD student at Gaylor College in the University of Oklahoma. And today I will be presenting the result from my study connecting a global capability framework for PR and communication management to organizational and cultural socialization. So a short background is that it's important to identify the differences between non-Hispanic and Hispanic professionals working here in the United States. And we are going to be focused on the US in the global capability framework created for the US to identify these differences and similarities between these 2 groups. Why this study? Well, the Hispanic population is growing every day here in the United States and is projected to to be the 25% of the total US population by 2050. I think it's really important also to understand how culture can make an influence in the professionals and in the profession here in the United States. Some questions that we are going to answer with this study. What are the most important capabilities in public relations according to these professionals here in the United States? What are the main impediments to achieve these capabilities? If there are any similarities or differences in these impediments. Also, we are going to identify in what ways is socialization and culture manifest here in the profession of public relation and communication, and the same if we have any differences or similarities between non-Hispanic and Hispanic professionals. Our study population, well, we had 20 participants. The 80% were females, the 20% were males, 65% were non-Hispanics, and 35% were Hispanics. And the average age was 37 years old, and they have been working in PR for 13 years. And some job titles: CEOs, VPs, directors, specialists, and professors. Well, the findings: the most important public relation capabilities here in the United States, according to these professionals, the top three is strategic planning, understanding the global world and its diversity, and analytical and critical thinking. But all participants agree that to work with ethics is very important and is always manifest in the profession. So it's implicit, the ethics is always going to be implicit in the profession. So they don't have to include it like in the top three because it's always going to be there. What are the main obstacles to develop these capabilities? Participants say that understanding data and the lack of full culture of learning are the main impediments. When they are talking about understanding the data, they are talking about that we have a lot of information, we have a lot of data, but we don't know how to analyze all this data, thinking about how to create a great communication with this data. And about the lack of culture of learning, well, they were focused about that we need to be our all, we need to learn for our own. We can't wait that other people tell us that, okay, we need to learn this or learn these other things. I mean, this need to be from our own thinking. Some similarities and differences that we identify in these two groups. Well, non-Hispanics, they were focused more in understanding how to analyze the data, thinking about solving this impediment that they were focused more in this, in how to analyze data. But Hispanics, they think that understanding diversity and the lack of diversity in the profession and the lack of interest in know about the world among young professionals is very important at this moment. So many professionals are closed our mind and they don't understand the world and the different cultures. They think that if we work with diversity, if we understand other cultures, this is going to help us to develop these capabilities. Now talking about socialization and working with others, the three key elements participants identified were understanding business operation, engagement, and building relationship are the most important elements to work with others. When they were talking about business operations, they say that as a communication professional, it's important to understand business, the business goals. If we understand this, we are going to create better communications. And when they were talking about building relationships, they were focused more in how sometimes departments inside organizations are working separately. And they say that it's very important to try to work always together. For example, the marketing department and the PR department, they need to work together, always thinking in sales and create engagement with the communications. Some similarities and differences. Well, Hispanics, they were focused again in the diversity aspect. They say that as a professionals, if we understand cultures, if we work with diversity, this is going to help us to create better relationships inside organizations. But non-Hispanics, they were focused more in the business. So they say that they think that if we understand how the business works, this is going to help us more to create relationships internally in the organization. The role of culture in the profession. Okay, 6 participants say that culture does not make influence in the profession. They say that what is really important is who you are and how your brain works. But 10 participants say that culture can help you to differentiate from other professionals in the industry. I mean, if you have like culture experience, if you work with diversity, I mean, this is going to help you better to differentiate it from other professionals in the industry at this moment. Some challenges and opportunity we identify with the culture. The manifestation of the culture is that to find professionals who are open-minded and who speak the more than one language is very difficult at this moment. But at the same time, this becomes in an opportunity. If as a professionals, we can speak more than 2 or 3 languages, that is going to be better for us as a professional. As I said before, this is going to help us to differentiate from other professionals. I mean, a company who is working always thinking in rich global audiences is going to be better for them if they can have professionals with multi-language. And some practical implication that we identified here is that first, learning about the world is very important. Professionals here in the United States need to understand that what happens outside the United States can affect what is happening in your organization here in the United States. So it's important to understand what is happening outside the United States. And we can learn about this with different channels like CNN or Newsy, or for example, with some TV shows. For example, Netflix at this moment is showing some documentaries where they are showing us what is happening outside the United States, how they are working in other countries, and maybe all that information can be used to create better strategies here in the United States. The second point is multi-language acquisition. Now we can say that we can't learn another language, that is difficult to learn another language. We have a lot of tools and they are free sometimes that can help us to learn the basics. I mean, you don't need to maybe at the beginning to be proficiency in a second language, but if you understand the basic, if you can understand another language, that is going to be beneficial for you as a professional. And the last one is new skills acquisitions. The same, we can say that we can't learn new skills. We have the tools at this moment. Thanks to the online environment, we have a lot of tools that we can use to learn more. We can think that because I am a PR professional, I'm just going to focus in how to write messages. It's important maybe if you can learn how to work design, how to work video development. If you know all this, is going to be better for you. What is happening if a company is trying to hire a professional in their skills that they are looking for, they are asking a professional who knows how to use all these skills, and you don't have just one. Of course, the company is going to select the person with more skills. So it's important that you can learn more skills and you have the tools. And that would be all. Thank you so much.
Luis, that was a great job. Thanks so much. Next up is Gloris Trujillo from the University of Alabama. And Gloris' thesis is how PR agencies communicate diversity and inclusion on their websites. So Gloris, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. I will share my screen again because I didn't have my mic on, so.
Gloris, were you able to hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen now. Well, once again, thank you so much for the opportunity of being here to present this research. This was my thesis for my master's degree in advertising and public relations. As Ken mentioned, is under the title, How Public Relations Agencies Communicate Their Diversity and Inclusion Efforts on Their Websites. The purpose of this study is to evaluate the status of diversity and inclusion statements displayed on public relations agencies' websites using the leveraging variety model. When I first started doing this research and when I first went to the US, I saw that the conversation around diversity and inclusion had a lot of, there was a lot of conversation around this topic, and there was a lot of research about it and how to improve diversity within the field, but there wasn't an analysis or a proof of what the agencies specifically, not just organizations, but PR agencies were doing to improve diversity within the industry. So I found, well, first of all, it's important just to remember the benefits of having a diverse workforce. And I'm happy to come after Luis' presentation because he already stated a couple of them, so that's great. Well, problem solving is one of the benefits that we can get from a diverse workforce, as well as financial income. There is research that backs up that a more diverse workforce can influence on the financial performance of a company. Also, it can have an impact on reputation, internal communications, creativity, and much more. Here are some important demographics to have in mind when talking about diversity and inclusion. The workforce by gender is 72% female and 28% male. Nevertheless, on leadership positions, they are mostly held by men. And also when talking about race, 90% of the PR workforce are Caucasian, followed by 8% Black, 2% Hispanics, and less than 0% Asians. I just wanna go through the theoretical framework that I use pretty quick. This is a model that was presented by Ravanasi in 2015 when she was studying how organizations address diversity practices in the workplace. So there are three different approaches. Here we can see the assimilating minorities one, the integrating diversity, and the leveraging variety. The assimilating minorities can be considered as the most basic way to approach diversity within the organizations. And then the leveraging variety model can be considered the highest one because it takes into account not just to avoid lawsuits or to go to follow laws, is to they actually see a competitive advantage of having a diverse workforce in the workplace. 236 public relations agencies' websites were analyzed for this study to see how they were communicating these diversity and inclusion efforts on their websites. This is important because a website is a way that you can attract talent, and previous research show that diverse talent feel more attracted to companies that show diversity and inclusion practices in any way of communication. So now I will present my findings and some analysis behind it. When I was developing my thesis with my chair and my committee members, they told me to focus on only one or two dimensions of diversity because, as we all know, diversity is a very broad term. But that was my main my main focus. I did want it to know what are the dimensions that we are most talking about. Like I wanted to see, are we talking more about sexual orientation or gender or disabilities? So that way we as practitioners and also the organizations can identify where we need to work and put more efforts through these dimensions. So when I was analyzing the websites, I created a code book taking into following the leveraging variety model that I presented before. And I also took the top 50 diversity Inc. companies, and I saw the practices that they had, and I developed this code book. And with this code book, I analyzed these websites, and the top three dimensions that were mentioned were diversity of skills and professional background, followed by gender and then disability. Gender and disability are the main dimensions on the assimilating minorities model, which is considered the most basic one. But diversity of skill and professional background can show that companies want to address diversity as a broader term than just visible diversity, which can be good, but it can also be a challenge about why we are not actually mentioning or facing or working with a specific type of dimension of diversity. Then one of my questions was more about the photograph on the websites. As we all know, a picture can support your messages. So I wanted to see which gender and races are frequently portrayed in the photograph of the public relations agencies' websites. My study shows that almost half of them portray both female and male, which is, it doesn't go along with the statistics that we have with the workforce. But then the second one, then 36% of the pictures do show more female, just females on the pictures than males. Now, following this question, I also coded what races were portrayed on this photograph. And I divided by exclusively white or white with another race or white and black or exclusively black and different categories. And 43% of the pictures that were analyzed exclusively showed white professionals on the websites. Now, this was also an important question for my research because I wanted to see what practices were public relations agencies communicating. In my personal experience, I know that there are a lot of initiatives happening on PR agencies, but when I was doing my research, this was a surprise for me because I saw that some of them, they weren't communicating those efforts, which was, maybe we can study that on a future research about why they're not communicating that. I know that those are internal actions that they are taking, but this can be a way to attract more talent. And as we have seen, if we are committed to diversity and inclusion, why we don't communicate about what we are doing about it? So I think that it's just a challenge for the PR's agencies. If you are doing something this community about diversity and inclusion, don't be afraid and communicate that so you can attract more diverse talent and better professionals in general. So the practices were the ones that was most frequently communicated was professional development, followed by flexible work hours, and then strategic communications, strategic partnerships, mentorship programs, diversity and inclusion activities, minority recruitment, diversity and inclusion, if they had an officer in place, trainings and resource groups. Trainings and professional development are different because I coded training has diversity and inclusion trainings. And then this is important to mention, and I just want to go through it pretty quick. I did a comparison between the organizational size, like the size of the how many employees the agencies had, just to see if the size of the agency influenced on the presence of a diversity statement. A diversity statement was defined as the written commitment to the diversity and inclusion on their websites. And here we can see that the smaller the agency, the less presence of a diversity and inclusion statement. And when we talk about revenue or income, it's the same case. So we can see that larger agencies usually do have a diversity and inclusion statement, when smaller agencies or boutique agencies, they usually don't. So this is all for me. Thank you so much. Let's talk more about diversity and inclusion or PR in general. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or through email. Thank you so much.
Gloria, thank you so much. That was really insightful. And I think we all can learn lessons from this presentation that you just made. Next up is our winner. The creator of the 2020 Best Makovsky Master's Thesis Program is Manuelita Maldonado, as I mentioned before. And Manuelita goes to the University of Southern California, and her thesis is The Rise of Intelligent Machines, How Artificial Intelligence is Transforming the Public Relations Industry. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Ken. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. And special thanks to Makovsky and the Institute for Public Relations, Tina and Ken, for organizing this special event. My name is Manuelita Maldonado from Bogota, Colombia. And today I'll be sharing my research on the rise of intelligent machines, how artificial intelligence is transforming the public relations industry, where we will be taking a closer look at the new relationship between humans and intelligent machines, and how this relationship is increasingly allowing PR professionals to make faster and better informed decisions. So thanks to science fiction characters like Hal or Samantha from Her or Ava from Ex Machina or even the Terminator, we tend to think of AI as something that's a little scary and a little intriguing, but that ultimately belongs to the future and has yet to be developed. But the truth is that this revolutionary technology is already here, and it is changing our lives in more ways than we can count. So for example, whenever Netflix predicts what shows we would like to watch next based on our previous engagements, or whenever Uber predicts what is the best route to take in the morning based on live traffic data, there's always an artificial intelligence algorithm behind, helping us make decisions every day. And of course, the public relations industry is not the exception. These are only a few companies and organizations that are already studying and deploying artificial intelligence technologies for communication purposes. So as PR professionals, we must stop thinking of AI as something that will happen in the future and start educating ourselves about the different applications that come with this technology as it relates to our jobs. And this is exactly what my research is attempting to do. But before we take a deep dive into what AI is and its different applications in the field of PR, I would like to take a quick look at the conversation about this topic to see how PR professionals and academics are currently understanding it. So one of the first studies that I came across during my research was the USC Annenberg Global Communication Report, which asked a group of about 1,500 PR professionals how knowledgeable were they about the future applications of AI in communication. So as you can see in this chart, the study showed that 46% of professionals consider themselves as somewhat knowledgeable, while 40% consider themselves not at all knowledgeable, which means that a staggering 86% of PR professionals are still unsure about the applications of AI in the field of communication. But what was most interesting to see was that in the same survey, PR professionals reported that they were using tech tools to conduct media monitoring, website analytics, social media management, and social listening, all of which involve some form of AI. And then again, only 3% said AI was relevant to the work they were doing today. So these findings suggest that there is a significant misunderstanding, perhaps a knowledge gap, about the current applications of AI in the practice of public relations. However, my research also shows that the conversation about the influence of AI is slowly starting to gain importance within the academic and professional realms of the PR industry. As the adoption rate of this technology increases and more platforms are created, there is an increasing need to study and discuss this topic in a more rigorous way, which is why we're seeing more organizations like PR agencies, universities, and research centers addressing it in the last 3 years. And it's important to take into account that my research was focused on examining studies published in 2018 and 2019. So we will likely find more publications and conferences than the ones I have referenced here. But even though scholars and professionals are increasingly discussing the impact of AI in PR, my research also shows that the conversation is facing 3 main challenges that are preventing the discussion from moving forward. The first challenge is what I call AI skepticism, or the belief that AI is not having a significant impact on the work PR professionals are doing today, as I explained previously. The second challenge is AI anxiety, or the idea that PR professionals will one day be replaced by robots. And then the third challenge is the AI hype, or the belief that AI can solve all kinds of business challenges with very little human input. So what's my purpose here? The purpose of my research is to demonstrate that contrary to the belief that AI is not having a significant impact on the PR industry, or that it will replace us, this technology is transforming the way PR professionals target demographics, measure the effectiveness of their communication campaigns, obtain insights into the media landscape, interact with influencers, and approach a crisis. But what is AI exactly, and how can it be applied in the field of public relations? So AI is actually older than you may think. It is even older than me, and I'm not as young as you think I am. But the term artificial intelligence was coined in 1956 by this handsome group of computer scientists at Dartmouth College. It was defined by Herbert Simon, one of its pioneers, as a branch of computer science that studies the phenomena that appear when computers perform tasks that, if performed by people, would be regarded as requiring intelligence. But one of the most important things to understand is that AI is not the super smart machine we all imagine whenever somebody talks about AI, like the Terminator here. This super advanced Terminator-like technology is usually referred to as artificial general intelligence, or strong AI. Unfortunately for us, this technology where machines can perform an infinite amount of cognitive tasks does not exist yet. So the AI technology that we have today, the real AI, is known as artificial narrow intelligence, or weak AI, which are basically algorithms that can only perform one task at a time, like measuring sentiment on social media or recommending videos on TikTok. But they can do it really well, probably better than a human can. So how exactly does it work? In general terms, it all starts with machine learning, which is the most common type of AI. Machine learning uses statistics to find patterns in large data sets to make predictions. And then there's different kinds of machine learning, like supervised or unsupervised, and they each have a different functionality. But the important thing here is that thanks to machine learning, we now have technologies or capabilities, as I call them, like the ones I listed here, that allow us to process and analyze all kinds of texts, images, and audio files. So natural language processing, for example, is a technology that enables Alexa or Siri to process our words and translate them into commands, like playing a song, for example. Image recognition is what allows Facebook to suggest tags whenever they see our image, or what allows self-driving cars to see the road. Text prediction happens every time Gmail completes your sentences before you get a chance to type them. It basically predicts what you're going to say. And ranking systems can be seen in our social media feeds, for example, when we see the posts of the people that we care about the most first. And then recommendation systems is what allows Amazon or YouTube to predict what product or what video you would like to buy or watch next. So what all these technologies or capabilities are allowing us to do in the field of PR is unprecedented. Thanks to these algorithms, we can now identify topic trends, detect bot attacks, measure sentiment, curate media lists, prepare speeches, proofread and translate, create and curate content, identify brand mentions or images of our brands, and much more. So now I am going to show you 2 examples of how brands have used AI to solve a communication need. So the first case study is CISCO Systems. Back in 2016, the technology company CISCO partnered with Quid, which is a research platform that uses AI to analyze and visualize data, as you can see here, to identify key market trends and strategically join the conversation about the Internet of Things online. With Quid, CISCO was able to process millions and millions of media posts to identify key themes in the conversations about Internet of Things. So as you can see in this graph, CISCO was able to identify 7 trending topics, such as concerns about privacy and security, and interest in innovation in smart homes or wearables or smart cities. And based on these findings, CISCO was able to develop a content strategy roadmap that would meet the interests and the concerns of their audience. The second case study is Advanced Micro Devices, or AMD. So back in 2018, the semiconductor company AMD noticed some unusual movement on their social media channels. It turns out that thousands of Twitter users were rapidly spreading negative information about the company's products. So the company partnered with Signal Labs, and they used their intelligent bot platform to analyze the conversation and pinpoint key influencers that were driving these conversations on social media. And what they actually found was incredible. AMD discovered that these harmful comments were not exactly being spread by humans, but by thousands of malicious bots, as shown in the dashboard here. So each colored dot that you see there represents a bot spreading negative information about the company with the purpose of harming AMD's reputation, something that could potentially affect the company's share price in the stock market, for example. In fact, these attacks are often made by third parties that are short selling a company, which means these parties would benefit from spreading negative information about a company like AMD. So already knowing that the source of this crisis was not necessarily organic or human, but rather orchestrated by a farm of bots, AMD was able to develop an informed crisis communication strategy to mitigate the effects of the attack and protect its reputation in Wall Street. So to conclude, I don't think AI is here to replace us, but it is definitely here to stay. It is allowing us to make faster and better informed decisions by providing relevant insights we wouldn't otherwise know. This means that in order to thrive in the age of artificial intelligence, PR practitioners must cultivate our ability to learn and understand the influence of this technology and embrace it as not as an enemy or a solve-it-all solution, but as a partner that will help us connect with other humans in a more meaningful way. That's it for me. Special thanks to my advisors at USC, Jennifer Floto, Burkhard Tenderick, and Fred Cook. And special thanks to Alex Smith from Signal Labs and Megan Jordan from Chromadex for their contributions to the research. And if you're interested in discussing this topic further, please make sure to connect with me. Thank you so much.
Manuelita, that was filled with insights that are very valuable to all of us. And I want to thank you very much. And it really reemphasizes the reason that Makovsky has invested in the future of our industry in this way. So thank you so much. Now we're opening it up to questions and answers. And I'm asking our speakers if they could please turn their cameras on. And when you enter your questions, make sure you indicate who you are addressing the question to. So we have a question here from Judith Cushman. What did you look at that connects with performance? This is for Clarice. What did you look at that connects with performance, as opposed, for example, to say hired a D&I VP versus saying the seniority of the diverse hires as opposed to junior level? And also, what about stability and retention? Give us your thoughts. Thank you, Judy Cushman.
Well, I feel like I want to see if I do understand the question. Are you asking me about how do I see the connection between performance and staying at the job, like staying at the company? Is that your question about?
I believe so.
Well, my research cannot answer that question specifically because I'm analyzing what they're communicating on their websites. But for me, this research is like the first step to answer these type of questions too, because if we know what agencies are doing, we can start asking, okay, if is this working or not? So when you see the model, the theoretical framework that I use, one of the levels or categories is the management structure. So as future research, we can take into account the employees within the agency and ask them, okay, they do have this program in place. What do you think about it? Is this effective? Because I have attended to a lot of talks, and one of the challenges about having diversity and inclusion initiative in place is the measurement of their effectiveness. Are we going to measure if we do have diverse talent, but are they on a manager position? Are they juniors, entry levels? So measuring the impact of this initiative is important, but right now it's still a challenge to actually measure if they are being effective or not.
Clarice, actually, the next one is from you to you as well. Asking, do you have a breakout of what experiences are included in the professional development category?
Yeah, I do have it, but I have it on my code book, so I will have to go back and check it out. But you can type your email and I can send it to you. Maybe for future research, you can use the same code book or maybe adapt it. So I can send it to you.
Do you have any instinctive impressions you want to lend on that?
About the professional development category? I mean, some of that I could remember, some of the categories, some of the activities that I mentioned were like trainings. There are a lot of agencies that have like universities within the agency. So those type of initiatives were under the professional development one. Or also there were a couple that they were international ones and they had exchange within offices abroad. So I also count this type of initiative as professional development ones.
Okay, the next question from Mike Fernandez is really asking for perspectives from each of the speakers, and I'll read it. It's a little long, so listen carefully. I would love to hear each of your reflections, perspectives on two items. One, what one of two things can PR agencies and communications departments inside companies do to make diverse talent feel more welcomed and more valued? Two, given the growing diversity of the US marketplace and with more consumers with a foot in two or more cultures, what one or two things do companies need to be aware of to be more relevant to today's more diverse Gen Z consumers who also are the world's first true digital natives?
So who wanna go
Maurice, do
first?
you go first, since it has a strong focus on D&I?
Well, from my research and from my own experience as an intern in a PR agency, I feel like having the research groups is really helpful, but also just having the those talks that nobody wants to have within the workplace. I remember when I was interning in New York was Pride Month. I'm not part of the community, but I consider myself an ally. So I think that being active and being supportive of these groups and supportive of the activities that they have within the agencies can be a way to make these diverse talent feel more welcome. And also, if you, well, I don't know if you had the chance to see on the chart, but one of the negative effects of having a diverse workforce can be also pigeonholing that, okay, you're a Latina, so you are only going to work on Latino accounts. So I feel like just giving this diverse workforce to show their talents and their abilities in a sense, like farther from just multicultural accounts, will give them the opportunity to grow as professionals and not just as a Latina PR professional. Like she's a PR professional, so and she has the abilities and the capabilities to perform well. So just being aware about their identity as a whole, but giving them the opportunity to also expand their knowledge and bring their perspective in different accounts and um, not just accounts that focus on this market. I think that that will be a way to make them feel more welcome.
Luis and Manuelita, would you like to comment on this, even though this wasn't your focus?
You go, Luis.
Okay. Well, I think Gloris made a great point. I think the key element is more opportunity for all of people, not just Latin American people, but people from different. I mean, diversity opportunity is the key. Also, I think is more easy. I mean, it's easier to say what not to do than what to do. For example, at this point, with all the issues that are happening with all the different cultures here in the United States and with all the diversity, I realized that companies and organizations started like, it was a multicultural crisis. So I'm just going to make a post saying that I support this culture, and that with that, I am saying that I am a multicultural organization, and that is very wrong. If you in your past, in your previous communication, you never share that you are multicultural, if you never show to your audiences that you are multicultural, you can't say right now because there was a problem that you are a multicultural company. So this is something that need to be improved in the communication departments for all the organizations. Need to be aware of what happened, but not just because there is a crisis, start to share and say that I'm multicultural.
Thanks, Luis. Manuelita, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what Gloris and Luis just mentioned. I think for Mike's first question, what can you do? I think one thing that I've always been a huge advocate for is kind of acknowledging the uniqueness of each person's background, because I feel that that's what makes them diverse. So for instance, it's very easy for us to classify diversity based on things that are evident to us, like race or gender or, you know, obvious things, but there's so much more, right? I'm, for example, Colombian, but that doesn't mean that, or in Latin American as well, but that doesn't mean that every Latin American person is the same, right? And I feel like sometimes we tend to generalize Latin American, and you know, here in the United States, I've had a lot of people asking me why don't I like spicy foods? And it turns out that I'm Colombian, not Mexican, and there's a difference there. Right? So acknowledging those small differences, and as Gloris mentioned, having those conversations where people can share more about their backgrounds and the history of their countries and their knowledge, as opposed to only like a racial experience or a gender experience, things like that would enrich the conversation way more. And then to answer the second question, what can you do to address a more diverse marketplace? Back to my thesis, I think AI is allowing us to do our research, right? So if we want to reach out to Gen Zers, they're online all the time, right? So if you have the proper tools and the proper questions, like the research questions, to be better understand these audiences, you're gonna find tons of information online. So just make sure that you're using the right tools and you're approaching the right audiences in order to answer the business questions that you may have, and approach them depending on what your product or service is.
Thanks, Manuelita. The next question is designated for Luis, and the questioner is asking, which theory did you use in your thesis, and how was the coding process of the interviews?
And then we have time for about one more question after this one, just to make everyone aware. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be fast. Well, my research was used a qualitative method, and we were focused on and the theoretical framework was focused in a sociological understanding of the PR profession. Also, we were focused on the capability theory of Zen, and we used descriptive codification for this research. So we identified, we interpreted the answer for the participants.
Okay, the next questioner is Frank Oviatt, who is asking if proofreading is one of the current uses of AI. So this is for you, Manuelita. If proofreading is one of the current uses of AI in communications, is that particularly on websites? And does anyone have any commentary on whether this is leading to more casual errors than before?
I'm not sure if I follow if that's particularly on websites. When I talked about proofreading, that technology is in Word, for example. You can see it there, or you can see it in Gmail sometimes if you download the proper tools. But I think the greatest example and the smartest one, and I use it every single day as a second language speaker, right, because my native language is Spanish, is Grammarly. And so Grammarly is, I think, a great example, because what it does, it's that it corrects your texts based on the context of what you're trying to say, right? And so they have like a premium service as well that kind of like gives you a little bit more AI experience. Like, it uses more AI to analyze what it is that you're trying to say and to communicate, and what's the best way to communicate that. If that's leading to more casual errors, without, I don't know if the question is like, are we depending on these technologies more and more, and that's keeping us from properly writing or checking our spelling? Likely, I think we're growing more and more dependent on these tools. But hey, it's great if it's allowing us to communicate and make sure that we're proofreading our texts. I think we should take advantage of that. And back to the point of diversity, if English is not my native language, it's great that I have access to these tools, because they're making it better and making it easier for me to do a great job in a different country or in a different language.
Manuelita, I'm going to squeeze in one question that I've been wanting to ask you, even though we have many more here to go. And what are the most uncommon uses today that you predict within 5 years will be very common uses of AI?
That's a great question, Ken. I have lots of answers for that one. I think the technology in general is going to become better. So one area that I see improving is our ability to measure sentiment. So right now we're measuring what's positive versus negative, but I think in the future we'll be able to even measure emotions, like people are sad or people are angry, and we're going to have more categories to understand really what it is that people are feeling. Another area, and I actually have an article about it that I published with the USC Annenberg magazine, is storytelling. So, right now we really don't have the technology to be able to write stories or to write pitches or things like that. But I predict that in the future, there will be some sort of platform that is going to analyze our texts or our stories or our campaigns and measure the emotional arc and predict if this is going to be, in terms of storytelling, if it's going to be something that people will enjoy or engage with versus something that might be uninteresting. So I think at one point AI is going to propel and improve our ability to tell stories and connect with other humans.
Well, I think we've run out of time. You guys have been absolutely sensational. It's been great working with you. I'm so impressed with the work that you've done. And what can I say but a big thank you. We have many more questions that we aren't going to have time to answer, but hopefully we can get them to you. You can answer some of these questions individually after the program. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tina.
Yes. Okay, this marks the end of the webinar. The playback will be made available on the IPR website shortly, so please check back for that. We would like to give a special thank you to our presenters, Luis Vergara, Gloris Trujillo, and Manuelita Maldonado, and thanks to you all for joining us today. Please visit our website at www.institute4pr.org for the latest research. We depend on you to help sponsor these webinars, so if you would like to make a donation to IPR, you may do so on our website as well. Thank you and have a great day.